Good. You are here. That already separates you. This message is not designed for the crowd, not shaped for comfort, not crafted for those who seek noise. It is measured, it is deliberate, and it carries weight. Listen carefully. God will rebuild you in front of the very people who broke you. Pause with that. Let it settle. Not behind closed doors, not hidden in shadows, but in clear sight, where every doubt once echoed, where every dismissal once lingered. You were not brought here by coincidence. Something within you recognized the signal, because you have always sensed there was more to your story than what others concluded, more to your silence than what they assumed, more to your restraint than what they interpreted as weakness. You have walked through spaces where your presence was misunderstood. You have stood in moments where your depth was inconvenient, and still you remained, not because you were unsure, but because you were becoming. This is not content for entertainment. It is recognition. It is confirmation. You are not common. You were never designed to blend into average expectations. The friction you encountered was not random. It was refining. What felt like isolation was alignment. What felt like confusion was preparation. And now you are beginning to see it clearly. Every experience carried a pattern. Every setback concealed direction. You are not here to be explained to. You are here to be revealed to yourself. And what is about to unfold will not simply motivate you. It will name what you have always known, but could never articulate. Stay with this, because the rebuilding has already begun. You remember the pattern, the sideways glances, the conversations that shifted when you entered the room, the way your ideas were questioned before they were even heard. You were labeled difficult when you were simply perceptive. You were called distant when you were simply discerning. Again and again, you were measured by standards too small to hold you. Doors closed without explanation. Invitations faded without reason. Opportunities slipped toward those who carried less depth but more convenience. And for a time, you wondered if the common denominator was you. You examined your tone, your presence, your timing. You replayed moments in your mind searching for flaws. But what they struggled to handle was not deficiency. It was intensity. Not arrogance, but awareness. You carried insight that unsettled fragile egos. You asked questions that disrupted shallow comfort. You saw through facades that others depended on to survive. That kind of clarity unsettles people who prefer illusion. Every abandonment, every slight, every quiet removal from spaces where you once stood was not proof of inadequacy. It was confirmation of distinction. You were tuned to a level most could not access. And when people cannot interpret what they feel around someone, they default to avoidance. It was easier for them to shrink you than to rise toward you, easier to exclude than to expand. The loneliness you endured was sharp, and it left marks. But those marks are not scars of failure. They are signatures of refinement. You were being filtered from environments that could not sustain your trajectory. You were being redirected from circles that would have diluted your direction. The stillness you inhabited was not dismissal. It was divine sorting, a narrowing of path, a tightening of alignment. You were never the issue. You were the standard that exposed the limitations around you. There is a truth you sensed long before you could articulate it. What unfolded around you was not accidental, and it was never impartial. The tension in certain eyes was not confusion, it was calculation. Long before distance appeared, observation had already begun. Your cadence was monitored. Your reactions were measured. Your strengths were quietly mapped. Some smiled while memorizing your patterns. Some applauded while studying your rhythm. What looked like casual interaction carried intention beneath it. You were not surrounded by uncertainty. You were surrounded by awareness. They recognized capacity before you fully embraced it yourself. They detected momentum before it became visible. And rather than rise to meet it, they chose a different strategy. Subtle interruptions, strategic discouragement, carefully timed doubt. Not loud enough to expose motive, but precise enough to create friction. This was never about misunderstanding. It was about control. And control becomes threatened in the presence of someone who cannot be easily shaped. Understand this clearly. Departure was not triggered by your insufficiency. It was provoked by your magnitude. Some individuals retreat when they realize influence is slipping from their grasp. Some attempt imitation before attempting sabotage. They borrow your language, mirror your demeanor, replicate your posture, hoping proximity might grant them what discipline built within you. And when imitation fails, resistance follows. Quiet competition, disguised comparison, conversations held in rooms you were not invited into. Not because you lacked worth, but because you disrupted hierarchy without trying. You carried weight that shifted dynamics simply by existing. That kind of presence exposes insecurity without speaking a word. So they distanced themselves to preserve comfort. They withdrew to protect fragile dominance. They convinced themselves that walking away was power, when in truth, it was surrender. You were never diminished. You were overwhelming. And rather than evolve, they chose escape. There came a moment that did not announce itself with noise. It arrived quietly, almost unnoticed, yet everything after it carried a different texture. The urge to justify yourself began to fade. The impulse to correct every false assumption lost its urgency. Where there was once a restless need to be understood, there was now restraint. You stopped volunteering access to your inner world. You stopped chasing resolution from those committed to distortion. Something within recalibrated. Your reactions slowed. Your responses shortened. You no longer rushed to fill gaps with explanation. Instead, you observed. You listened beyond words. You sensed intention beneath tone. What used to provoke you now revealed information. What used to wound you now instructed you. This was not indifference. It was elevation, a transition from reactive emotion to deliberate awareness. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable. Detachment did not harden you. It refined you. Your composure grew deliberate, measured, intentional. You learned the value of pause. You discovered the authority within restraint. Where chaos once pulled you into defense, you now stood grounded, unmoved. Quiet became leverage. Patience became precision. You understood that not every battle requires participation, and not every accusation deserves acknowledgement. You began conserving energy for execution rather than argument. That shift altered your presence. There was less urgency in you, yet more intensity. Less noise, yet greater impact. The version emerging from the aftermath was not fragile. It was focused, sharper in perception, slower in reaction, intentional in movement. You realized that strength does not always roar. Sometimes it waits, sometimes it watches, and sometimes it advances without warning, carrying a certainty that no external voice can disrupt. You did not declare it. You did not advertise it. Yet the air around you carries a different density now. When you enter a space, conversation subtly adjusts, posture straightens, attention recalibrates. No announcement is required. There is simply an unspoken awareness that something substantial has arrived. This is not performance. It is presence, the kind that cannot be fabricated because it was forged internally. You are no longer seeking validation through volume or visibility. You are grounded in something steadier. Your movements are deliberate. Your gaze is steady. Your tone is measured. And that composure communicates more than words ever could. Authority does not need to introduce itself. It settles into the room and lets others register it on their own. The pursuit that once consumed your energy has dissolved. You are not chasing approval, opportunity, or acknowledgement. Instead, you have become a point of focus. Invitations come without effort. Curiosity circles without explanation. People find themselves drawn in, unsure of what shifted, yet aware that something has. It is the quiet confidence of someone no longer negotiating their worth. It is the centered gravity of someone aligned within. You are not reaching outward to be seen. You are standing firm, and others adjust accordingly. This is the recalibration. This is the transition from striving to attracting. Your influence operates without spectacle. It does not demand attention. And those who once overlooked you now sense a force they cannot quite define, only feel. They cannot quite define, only feel. Growth matured into command. What began as internal repair evolved into disciplined control. You are no longer triggered by provocation or baited into unnecessary exchange. Instead, you assess. You gather data from tone, timing, micro-expressions, inconsistency. You recognize cycles before they repeat. You identify motives before they surface. This is not suspicion. It is pattern recognition sharpened through experience. You have trained yourself to remain composed while others reveal themselves. Where you once responded instantly, you now allow space. Where you once clarified your stance, you now let results speak. Your focus has narrowed, and that focus has depth. Every action is intentional. Every move is calculated. You conserve language and expand impact. There is discipline in your restraint, and that discipline creates leverage. From the outside, some interpret your reduced accessibility as withdrawal. They misread your selectiveness as coldness. But what they are witnessing is authority. You do not disperse energy recklessly. You do not grant access casually. You operate with precision, aware that influence increases when noise decreases. Your understanding is your crown. Your self-control is your advantage. You have learned that dominance does not require confrontation. It requires composure. You allow others to underestimate the quiet, while you build momentum without distraction. There is strategy in your distance. There is intention in your calm. You have shifted from participant to architect, shaping outcomes rather than reacting to them. And in that shift, mastery has taken root. There is a widening now that cannot be reversed. The distance between who you were and who you have become is no longer measurable by small increments. It is vast. It is undeniable. Those who once assumed they understood you can no longer anticipate your direction. The strategies that once unsettled you no longer register. The pressure points they relied on have disappeared. They search for familiar reactions and find none. They attempt to interpret your next step and come up empty. Access has been revoked without announcement. Influence has expired without confrontation. You have advanced beyond the coordinates they memorized. What used to be predictable is now impenetrable, and the realization unsettles them more than any argument ever could, because the version of you they thought they contained has evolved beyond their reach. What is unfolding is not subtle. It is evident. The elevation taking place in your life does not hide in obscurity. It stands in plain view. The same voices that dismissed your potential now fall silent before your progress. This is not quiet recovery in isolation. This is restoration displayed openly. The pressure meant to collapse you has reinforced you. The chaos intended to finish you has structured you. What they believed was permanent damage has become permanent strength. The very force they attempted to extinguish has solidified into something immovable. And now, as the transformation becomes visible, they are left observing from a distance they can no longer close. Take a breath and recognize what has been accomplished. The promise has not faded. It has manifested. God did not restore you in secrecy or mend you behind curtains. He restored you in full view. In the same arenas where doubt once circled. In the same environments where your worth was questioned. What stands before them now is not a repaired version of something fragile. It is a refined version of something formidable. The fractures they assumed were fatal were only formative. The pressure that appeared destructive was instructional. Nothing at your center was ever shattered. It was strengthened. Nothing essential was ever removed. It was reinforced. You were not discarded by destiny. You were developed by it. Every season that felt like loss was construction in disguise. Every delay was alignment in motion. Understand this fully. You were never meant to remain small enough for comfort. You were being shaped for visibility, for weight, for influence that cannot be dismissed. The rebuilding was intentional, precise, undeniable, and now it stands where all can witness it. Not as revenge, but as revelation. Not as noise, but as certainty. You are not driven by the need to prove anything. You are anchored in the knowledge of who you have become. This is not temporary momentum. This is established identity. You move with assurance that does not seek permission. You carry authority that does not request acknowledgement. And as silence settles around you, there is no urgency left, only presence. Remember this. You were prepared, not broken, forged, not finished, crowned, not crushed.